I didn't drive 7 hours back to Pennsylvania for the rehearsal dinner. I drove back because somewhere between the salmon course and the toasts, my mother was going to say something out loud that she'd been thinking for 11 years, and the man marrying my sister was going to recognize my name before the soup got cold. I knew this because I'd been planning around it since the engagement announcement hit my inbox 6 weeks earlier. What I didn't know yet was that my mother would say it before the salads went down, that my father would stare into his bourbon like it was scripture, that my sister's veil-fitting laugh would crack into something small and broken, and that the groom, her tall, smiling, well-bred groom, would push his chair back so fast it scraped the floor like a gunshot. He looked at me like a man who'd just realized the woman his future mother-in-law was insulting was the same woman whose signature sat at the bottom of a federal subpoena on his desk 3 weeks ago. He said, "Mother, stop. You don't understand what you're..." But you can't understand that dining room until you understand what happened first, at a kitchen table in a split-level house outside Reading, on a Tuesday afternoon in late August, when I was 18 years old and my parents taught me the lesson they were proudest of teaching. I had the acceptance letter from Penn State University Park in a manila folder. I had the tuition statement, the financial aid award, the gap. I had a yellow legal pad with the numbers I'd run 12 times. I had 2 jobs lined up for the fall. One tutoring kids in algebra, one stocking a Weedman's overnight. I had everything except the $11,000 the FAFSA had calculated my parents would contribute, because I'd been told, since I was a freshman in high school, that they were saving for it. That there was a 529, that I should focus on grades and not worry about money. I sat at the kitchen table with the folder open. My mother was peeling a clementine over the sink. My father had his laptop in front of him and was answering an email that did not exist. I'd seen him perform that exact email 1,000 times. "I need to talk about the gap," I said. I'd practiced the sentence in the car. I kept it short on purpose. My mother said. She put a piece of clementine in her mouth. The aid letter came. "The gap is about $11,000 for the year. I'm working 2 jobs, but I can't cover that and books in the dorm balance, so I need to know what the plan is." My father didn't look up. He typed slowly, like a piano teacher tapping out a rhythm. My mother turned around, leaned against the counter, and looked at me with the same expression she used when she found out I dented her car at 16. Disappointed, slightly amused, not angry, because anger would have been a kind of attention. "Sweetheart," she said, "this is the part where you become an adult." I waited. "We talked about this," she said, "which we had not. Your father and I think it's important for you to have skin in the game. You'll appreciate it more if you pay for it yourself." I'm paying for most of it myself. I'm asking about the gap. The 529, there isn't a 529 in your name. The clementine smell in the kitchen was suddenly very loud. I remember that. I remember the smell more than I remember her face. "You said we never said that specifically." "Dad," I said. My father looked up from the email that did not exist. "Your mom and I are on the same page," he said. He went back to typing. That was the whole conversation. It took maybe 4 minutes. 3 weeks later, my younger sister came home from school crying because her Honda Civic was, in her words, humiliating. She was 16. The Civic was 8 years old. By Friday afternoon, there was a used Volkswagen Jetta in the driveway. White, low miles, a year out of warranty, but still pretty. My father said he'd gotten a deal through a guy at work. My mother handed her the keys at the dinner table like she was passing down a family heirloom. My sister cried again, the good kind of cry this time, and hugged them both at the same time. I stood in the doorway holding a glass of water. The tuition statement was still in the same manila folder on the counter where I'd left it. Nobody had moved it. Nobody had touched it. It sat there like a body nobody wanted to claim. That's how favoritism actually works, I learned. It isn't loud. It isn't cruel out loud. It's accounting. It's where the money goes when nobody's watching. I enrolled anyway. I took out the maximum federal loans. I worked the Wegmans overnight shift, Thursday through Sunday, slept in my car between classes on Monday and Wednesday because the commute home and back wasn't worth it. I lost 12 pounds the first semester, not on purpose. I made the dean's list because I didn't have a social life to distract me. In February, my financial aid was recalculated. A clerical adjustment, the letter said. My parental contribution had been reassessed. I now needed to come up with an additional $3,600 within 30 days, or my account would be frozen and my spring registration revoked. I drove home on a Saturday. I sat at the same kitchen table. My mother was reading a catalog. My father was on his laptop. I need help, I said. I hated how small my voice sounded. 3,600 within 30 days, or I lose the semester. No, my mother said. She didn't even look up from the catalog. If we bail you out now, you'll never learn. You're paying my sister's cell phone bill. You bought her a car. That's different. She's still in high school. You said you would help. We said, my mother said, finally looking up, that we believed in you. Believing in you and writing you a check are not the same thing. My father, like clockwork, said, your mother's right. I drove back to State College that night. I sat in my dorm parking lot until 2 a.m. I didn't cry. I'd cried at the kitchen table when I was 16, and they laughed at me for it. Told me I was being theatrical, so I'd taught myself by 18 to do the crying somewhere they couldn't grade it. I withdrew on Monday morning. I packed my dorm room into 3 plastic bins and a duffel bag. I drove home one last time, loaded everything I owned into the back of my Civic, and pulled out of the driveway while my mother stood on the front step in her bathrobe. So that's it, she called after me. You're just giving up? I rolled the window down. I'd thought about what I'd say for the entire drive home. I'm not giving up, I said. I'm declining the offer. I drove 3 miles and pulled over because my hands were shaking. Then I drove to the Army recruiting office in a strip mall in Wyomissing, between a Great Clips and a tax preparation place that was closed for the off-season. The recruiter was a staff sergeant named Padilla. He had been in the office for 8 years and had the patience of a man who had heard every version of every story. He didn't make me explain myself. He asked what I wanted out of a contract. I said I wanted a job with rules that didn't change depending on who was favored. He looked at me for a long second and then opened a folder. Military police, he said. 5-year contract, tuition assistance after 18 months. You finish your degree on the Army's dime if you can keep your scores up and your nose clean. The work is hard. The work is boring more than it's hard. You okay with boring? Yes. You sure? Lot of kids walk in here looking for adventure. Adventure isn't a real thing. There's just work, and there's not working. I'm sure. I shipped to Fort Leonard Wood 11 days later. I called my parents from a payphone the night before I left and told them I wouldn't be home for the holidays. My mother said, well, that's your choice. My father didn't come to the phone. Basic was cold and loud and exactly as hard as I needed it to be. I learned to make a bed that a quarter could bounce off, and I learned that fatigue is a kind of honesty. You can't perform anything when you haven't slept in 40 hours, so you stop performing, and what's left is who you actually are. What was left of me, it turned out, was someone stubborn, someone who would not quit, someone who answered questions cleanly and didn't argue. I finished MP school at the top of my class. I got stationed at Fort Cavazos in Texas, which back then was still called Fort Hood. I worked traffic stops on base for 2 years and gate security for 1. I started taking online classes the second I qualified for tuition assistance, 2 at a time, then 3. I finished my bachelor's degree in criminal justice in 3 years and 7 months, while working a full-time job in uniform. My parents didn't come to my graduation. I didn't invite them. My mother called me 3 weeks after the ceremony because somebody at her book club had asked how I was doing and she didn't have an answer. We're so proud of you, she said, in a voice that had not earned the right to that sentence. Thanks, I said. Listen, your sister is having a hard time at Bucknell. The tuition went up and we're really stretched, and I thought, I'm not going to send you money. I wasn't asking for money. I was just, you were asking for money. A long pause. "I don't know what we did to make you this cold," she said. "I do," I said, and I hung up. I left active duty after 5 years. I spent a year working as a contracted investigator for a federal agency in Norfolk, finishing a master's degree in forensic accounting at night because somebody at work mentioned that the FBI had a specific pipeline for accountants and lawyers and military veterans, and that they were short on all three. I applied at 26. I got in. I went through Quantico the long winter of my 27th year and graduated as a special agent of the Federal Bureau of Investigation in the spring. My first office assignment was Norfolk for 2 years, and then Philadelphia, which I requested because my grandmother was getting sick, and I wanted to be within driving distance for the end of her life. She was the only person on either side of the family who had ever asked, with any sincerity, how I was doing. She died on a Sunday afternoon in February, with my hand on hers. My mother didn't come to the hospital. My mother said the drive was too much. The Public Corruption Unit recruited me out of the Philadelphia General Criminal Squad in my 3rd year there. I was good at follow-the-money work. I was patient. I didn't get bored reading bank records for 9 hours straight because I had spent so much of my early life trying to understand where money went and why it didn't go to me, and that turns out to be a marketable skill in federal law enforcement. The case that brought me to the rehearsal dinner started in March. A whistleblower at a mid-sized construction company in Bucks County had reported that the company's CFO was funneling money through 3 shell LLCs to the chief of staff of a state senator in exchange for inside information about upcoming infrastructure bids. The dollar figures were not enormous. The dollar figures rarely are in public corruption work. It's never about the money the way television tells you it is. It's about people who decide that rules are for other people and who find a way to make their decisions look like everybody else's decisions on paper. The CFO's name was on a subpoena I signed on a Tuesday in May. The name didn't mean anything to me until 2 Saturdays later, when an embossed envelope arrived at my apartment with my parents' names listed proudly at the bottom as the bride's parents, and the groom's name printed in italics across the front. I read the name 3 times. I went to my laptop. I pulled the company's S1 and the org chart we'd reconstructed from public filings. I sat in my kitchen and looked at the photograph and the wedding invitation. A beach engagement shot with my sister laughing into the groom's shoulder, and I matched his face to the face we had in our file. It was him. I called my assistant special agent in charge on a Sunday morning, which she did not appreciate, and told her what I'd just figured out. She asked me 3 questions. Was I currently the case agent? Yes. Had I disclosed any non-public information to any family member at any time? No. Did I intend to attend the wedding? I told her I wasn't sure yet. She told me to come into the office Monday, and we'd handle the recusal paperwork together. The Bureau is very good about recusals. We have a process. The process is built for exactly this situation, even though this situation never feels like exactly anybody else's. I signed the recusal forms on a Monday morning in May, 3 weeks before the wedding. My case was reassigned to a colleague named Park, who is a better lawyer than I am and who I trust. I had no further contact with the file. I had no information about the timeline of the indictment, the grand jury schedule, or any potential plea negotiations. I knew nothing the groom didn't already know himself, which, given that he'd been served a subpoena for financial records 3 weeks earlier, was actually quite a lot. I RSVP'd yes the same day I recused. Not because I wanted to see anyone, but because I wanted to be in the room when whatever happened, happened. There is a kind of presence that is not interference. I had learned that in the Bureau. Sometimes you stand somewhere not to act, but to make sure nobody else can pretend later that you weren't standing there. The rehearsal dinner was at a country club on the main line. The kind of place with brass fixtures and oil paintings of dogs holding pheasants in their mouths. My mother had picked it. She'd been talking about that country club since my sister was 12. She wanted, more than almost anything else she had ever wanted, for her younger daughter to get married in that exact dining room. I wore my service dress, not because I wanted to make a point, because the dinner was business formal and that was what I owned that fit the dress code without me having to buy something new. I parked in the side lot. I walked in alone. My sister saw me first. She was standing near the bar, holding a flute of champagne, and her face did something complicated. Surprise, then something I think was hope, then something that looked like she was waiting to be told what to feel. "You came," she said. "I came. Mom wasn't sure if you would. I told her I would. I know. She just—" My sister looked past me toward the dining room. "Never mind. I'm glad you're here." She hugged me. She had not hugged me since she was 15 years old. I let her. I didn't hug back exactly, but I let her. My father saw me from across the room and lifted his glass slightly, which was his version of an emotional gesture. My mother saw me a half-second later and her face did not move at all. I walked over to them because that's what you do. "Hello, Mother," I said. "Well," she said, "you decided to grace us. It's good to see you too." The groom was on the other side of the room, talking to two men in their 60s who I assumed were his father and his uncle. He had not seen me yet. He had his back to the door. My mother looked me up and down. She took her time about it. Then she said, loud enough that the 4 or 5 people closest to us could hear, and possibly loud enough for the rest of the room if they were paying attention, "And what is a little government desk girl like you doing all the way up here from the city?" A few people laughed. The laugh of people who don't know whether they're supposed to laugh, and so they do it tentatively, hoping somebody else will join in. I didn't answer her. I'd practiced not answering her for 11 years. "You don't feed it." But the groom heard. He turned around. He saw me. He saw the uniform and the rank insignia on my shoulder, which his lawyer would have walked him through in detail 3 weeks ago when the subpoena landed, and his face went the color of skim milk. His glass slipped slightly in his hand. He caught it. He didn't manage to catch his expression. "Mother," he said. Not to my mother. To his own, who was standing 2 seats down at the table. But everyone misheard it for half a second. He corrected himself. "Mom. Mrs." He stopped. He'd been about to call my mother by her first name and his throat closed. He looked at her, and then at me, and then at my sister, and then at the floor. "Sweetheart, what's wrong?" his actual mother said. "Nothing," he said. "You look like you're going to be sick." "I'm fine." My mother, oblivious, pressed on. She had the bit between her teeth. "She's some kind of file clerk for the federal government," my mother said to the room, with the same warm, dismissive voice she used to describe the neighbor's son who'd gone to community college. "We're so proud." "Mom," my sister said quietly. "Stop. I'm not doing anything," my mother said. The groom set his glass down on the bar very carefully, like it was made of something rare, and he said in a voice that did not carry but cut, "Ma'am. With respect. You need to stop talking." My mother turned and looked at him like he'd slapped her. "Excuse me?" I said, "Stop. Please." She laughed, the brutal laugh she does when she's been embarrassed and is trying to pretend she hasn't. "Honey, we are just teasing. We tease each other in this family. It's how we— Mrs. He used her last name. He did it on purpose. Do you know who your daughter is?" "I know exactly who my daughter is." "No," he said. "You don't. And you need to stop." The room had gone very quiet. The bartender had stopped polishing the glass he'd been polishing. My father had set down his bourbon and was looking at his hands. I said gently, "Why don't we take this somewhere else?" My sister was already moving. She took her mother's elbow. My father followed. The groom looked at his own parents, mouthed something to his father that I couldn't read, and followed us into a side parlor off the main dining room, a small room with a fireplace that wasn't lit, and 4 chairs and a tea table. He closed the door behind us. He turned to me before anyone else could speak. "Special agent," he said. "Not asking. Confirming. Yes. I had no idea you were her sister. I had no idea you were her sister. I had no idea. I want that on the record." "It's on the record. I filed for recusal 4 weeks ago. I have no involvement in your case." I won't have any involvement going forward. You and I have never spoken. We aren't speaking now in any official capacity. Okay. Okay. Thank you. What case? My mother said. Nobody answered her. What case? My mother said again. Her voice had changed. It had thinned out into something I had never heard from her before. Fear. The groom looked at my sister. My sister looked at me. I can't discuss it, I said. I'm not going to discuss it. It's not appropriate. Somebody tell me what's happening right now, my mother said. My father, who had not spoken since I walked in the building, said quietly, She's an FBI agent, Diane. That was the first time I'd heard him say it out loud. I told him 3 years ago. He'd never said it back. My mother looked at him. Looked at me. Looked at the groom, who was sitting on one of the chairs now with his elbows on his knees and his hands clasped together like he was praying. What kind of agent? My mother said. I work public corruption. And I'm not going to discuss it. My sister sat down on the other chair. She was holding her champagne flute still. She had not taken a sip from it in 20 minutes. She set it down on the tea table and it made a small sound, and then the room was quiet again. How long have you known? My sister said. 3 weeks, since the invitation came. And you didn't say anything. There was nothing for me to say. I recused. The case isn't mine anymore. I came tonight because I'm your sister and you invited me. That's the only reason. You could have called me. I couldn't, actually. It would have been a federal offense. She put her hand over her mouth. What is going on? My mother said. Her voice was rising. What did he do? The groom said very quietly. Ma'am, I have not been charged with anything. There is an investigation. I have a lawyer. We are cooperating. That's all I can say in this room. Cooperating with what? With the bureau, he said. My mother sat down. She sat down hard on the third chair, and she put both hands flat on her knees, and she stared at the cold fireplace. I had not planned to do what I did next. I want to be honest about that. I had brought the envelope with me out of some instinct I couldn't name. The way a person packs a flashlight for a trip they expect to take in daylight. I had not decided to use it. I decided in that moment, watching my mother stare at the fireplace and watching my father stand behind her chair, like a Secret Service detail, that I was going to use it. I took the envelope out of the inside pocket of my jacket and I laid it on the tea table. What is that? My mother said, without looking up. It's my FAFSA file from 2014, I said. The Department of Education sent me the full record last year. I requested it after I read an article about parental fraud on aid applications, and I wanted to see what mine looked like. My father went still. On the 2014 form, I said, You reported that I had a 529 account in my name with a balance of $41,000. The account didn't exist. It was never opened. The account number on the form matches an account that was opened in 2002 in my sister's name, with my sister as the beneficiary. My sister made a small sound. On the 2015 form, I said, After I withdrew from Penn State, you reported that you had contributed $16,000 in cash to my tuition over the previous 12 months. That contribution did not occur. There is no withdrawal from any account of yours that matches that figure. There is no deposit to my student account that matches that figure. The form was filed in November 2015. By that point, I had been enlisted in the United States Army for 14 months. My father sat down. He sat on the floor, actually, right there in front of the empty fireplace. His knees just went. On the 2014 form, I said, You also indicated that I was not a resident of your household and that I was responsible for my own tax filings. That was the line item that triggered the recalculation of my aid. The recalculation is what froze my account and forced me to withdraw. I have a copy of that form here. Your signature is on the bottom of it. I slid the page across the tea table. My mother looked at it. She did not pick it up. That isn't my signature, she said. It's notarized, I said. It's notarized at a UPS store and reading on August 14th, 2014. The notary's logbook still exists? I checked. I don't remember signing that. That's not a defense. I'm not in court, she said. Her voice was very small. No, I said. You're not. You never will be. The statute of limitations on federal aid fraud at that dollar figure ran out 3 years ago. I'm not here to charge you with anything. I couldn't if I wanted to. My sister was crying. She wasn't making any noise. The tears were just falling off her chin. Then why? My mother said. Because tonight, I said, you decided to call me a desk girl in front of 70 people, and I wanted you to see the desk. Nobody spoke for a long time. Finally, my father, from the floor, said, I didn't know about the 529 line. Yes, you did. You signed the form too. The second page. I didn't read it. That's also not a defense. He started to cry. He cried the way men of his generation cry, which is mostly through the shoulders, mostly without sound, mostly while trying to pretend they're doing something else. The groom said into the silence, I'm so sorry. He was talking to me. You didn't do this, I said. I'm still sorry. I know. My sister stood up. She walked across the small room and she stood in front of me and she said, I didn't know. I want you to know that I didn't know. I thought you just quit, I finished. Yeah, that's what they told you. That's what they told me. I know. What do I do? She said. That's not my question to answer. Please. I looked at her. She was 27 years old, and she was wearing a $6,000 dress, and she looked like she was 11. Postpone the wedding, I said. Not because of him. Because of him. You don't decide what kind of marriage you want to have inside this much shock. Take 6 months. Talk to him. Talk to a lawyer of your own, not his. Then make a decision. She nodded. The wedding was postponed the following morning. They sent a short email to the guests. They didn't explain. My sister moved out of my parents' house, where she had still been living between her lease ending and the wedding, and she rented a 1-bedroom in Manayunk. She and the groom went to couples counseling. He pled to a misdemeanor in the spring. He kept his job. He lost his bonus structure for 3 years and gained a federal monitor who reviews his email every Friday. They married 18 months later in a civil ceremony at the Philadelphia courthouse. I was there. My parents were not invited. My sister sent them an announcement afterward, and my mother did not respond. My father drove down to see me in the city 4 times that first year. We met at the same diner on the Schuylkill each time. He cried at 3 of the 4 lunches. He apologized at all 4 of the... On the 4th one, he said, I didn't know how to be a father to a daughter who didn't need anything from me. I told him that wasn't true. I told him I had needed plenty. I told him he had chosen to look at the laptop instead of at me, and that the choosing had been the wound, not the money. He nodded. He didn't argue. He sent me a letter every other Sunday after that for 6 years, until he died of a stroke in his sleep on a Tuesday afternoon in October, and the letters stopped, and I still have all of them in a banker's box in my closet. My mother sent flowers to the funeral. She did not come. We have not spoken since the rehearsal dinner. We will probably not speak again. I have made my peace with that. Some people don't change because changing would mean admitting that the version of themselves they've spent 40 years performing was a costume, and at a certain age, taking the costume off would leave nothing underneath. I understand that. I don't forgive it. I just understand it. My sister and I talk once a week. We are not best friends. We are something better than that, which is 2 people who chose, as adults, to know each other honestly, without the family system we grew up inside telling us how to feel. Her daughter is 4. The girl calls me auntie. I bring her books when I visit. I am very careful with her in a way I never had to learn, because nobody was very careful with me. People ask sometimes if I went back to that rehearsal dinner for revenge. I don't think that's the right word. Revenge is loud. Revenge wants an audience. What I wanted that night was much quieter than that. I wanted my mother to understand, just once, that the version of me she had been describing to her book club for 11 years was not the only version that existed. I wanted her to see the desk, like I said. I wanted her to see that the desk was not small. I kept the lesson she tried to teach me when I was 18. I just rewrote it. Independence, she said. Fine. Independence. But not the kind she meant, which was abandonment dressed up in a Sunday hat. The kind I built instead was something she never managed in her own life, which is the freedom to walk into any room she happens to be in and stand exactly where I want to stand, without asking and without apologizing and without needing her to call it by its right name. That, it turns out, is the only inheritance that nobody can withhold from you. You have to go out and earn it, and once you have it, it is the one thing in the world that cannot be taken back.